I did actually rewatch the first hour of the Batman, and I just wanted to say again, like how brilliant that like opening of the Batman is in terms of the sort of setting the scene of sort of Gotham, setting the scene as to sort of where the Batman is, where he is on this sort of kind of like journey and being the Batman. Just like how like they like set like the mood and like the vibes of like Gotham in this as well, and just like his like presence as like Batman in this movie. It's just brilliant. It's just like phenomenally done. Like I was genuinely again like falling in love with the movie all over again. So I'd say that's my best recent thing to watch. If you haven't watched something of the latest Batman, I would highly recommend checking out that movie. Honestly for me, it's near perfect.
Best thing I watched this week is Phone Booth, which is a 2002 psychological thriller movie. And it's essentially about this guy. He's this New York publicist who is shown to essentially use people for his own benefit in every aspect of his life. And then when he picks up a ringing phone in a phone booth, it turns out that he has been watched by this psychopath who wants to make an example of him by essentially saying, if you hang up the phone, he will start killing people. And so he starts playing these mind games with the guy, and it keeps escalating. Like somebody ends up dying, and then the police shows up and they think the publicist is the killer, and it just keeps getting worse and worse. And it's this mind game between the cop, the publicist, and the killer, who we only hear on the phone. And like the plot itself isn't really the important part about this movie. I think it's kind of a showcase for all you need for a great movie is a couple of good actors and a good script. Put them in a location and then just watch them go. This movie does suspense like nothing else. Within the first couple of minutes, it's got your attention, and it doesn't let go until the end. And like the actual plot and resolution is almost not important. It's just all these different performances and this whole thing about reputation and perception and people trying to use each other for various purposes. It just all kind of comes together in this very small and very suspenseful drama. Like we talked about Carry On a few weeks ago, and that very clearly took some notes from Phone Booth, but not enough. That does this particular thing probably better than anything else I've seen. So it's that one was really kind of a wake-up call, where if you watch this many movies and most of them are bad, eventually you stop believing that movies can do this. And then every once in a while one comes along that actually just reminds me why like movies are my favorite storytelling medium, because this can only be done in film, I think.
Definitely one I need to rewatch, Phone Booth. I've seen it quite a long time ago, but yeah, I remember it being really, really good and really like suspenseful and intense.
It's all the performances of like three actors. Like it's not a huge thing.
It's Colin Farrell, right? Colin Farrell.
Colin Farrell is the publicist. Yeah. Forrest Whitaker is the cop. I think Kiefer Sutherland is the killer. That's basically the three. And then like there's other characters too, but those are the three that drive the story, and they're all firing on all cylinders. I'm sure lots of people know this one, but I think it's just worth reminding. Like if you've kind of maybe lost sight a little bit of how good, well, like a thriller with a tight script can be, just rewatch this one.
I did catch the opening episodes of season 2 for the Squid Game. For anyone that doesn't know, Squid Game was a very popular Netflix TV show from a few years back, where it's a Korean, I believe. Don't let me get that wrong. Or it's an Asian TV show, just based on these people that are invited to the set of games to win some large amounts of money, and unbeknownst to them that if they lose in the game, they also lose their life as well. Just kind of like follows this character and his kind of like unlucky journey and whatever, and sort of how he overcomes and eventually wins the Squid Game. At the end of season 1, he was about to board a plane, decides to change his mind and go after the people that are running these Squid Games. And the opening episodes it's a few years later, and it's kind of like showing him trying to find the people and like sort of pouring all of these all his money that he earned into trying to find these people. And so far it's cool. What I'm like looking for is, because like from the advertisement it's kind of showing him back in the games, and I'm trying to sort of kind of like understand and piece together like how it makes sense for him to kind of like be back in the game. And so far it's making sense. He's like found the guy that initially invited him. they had like a very kind of like tense standoff moment between the two of them as well, which is actually like really cool to the ending of episode 1. And from there, he has a little bit kind of like more information to go off of. So all in all, it's a little bit early to sort of judge the season as a whole, which is why I'm kind of giving you mostly background on this, but it's a promising start so far to season 2, because I know the creator only wanted to make one season of it as well, and was sort of very clear in his comments that after season 2 he's like really happy to not be working on this for a while as well. So we're going to see what kind of work comes out of a person that didn't want to make a season 2 of a show. So we'll see how it develops throughout the season.
The last person who was in that position was Todd Phillips, just saying.
And we got the Joker too. So far it's not that level. So far he at least cares about what he created enough to not completely butcher the characters. But we'll see how it plays out.
I finished it. I really liked it. People had an issue with it on social media. I don't know if you've been checking. They had a big issue with it, but I liked it. Yeah. So I think to be fair, I don't know. I think you might have the same opinion as other people. I'm not too sure. I think you might. But
I missed the comments. What were the issues?
Mainly just the ending. And yeah, it's the way that any people's complain about, okay, 3 years and you give us this. And there's always going to be that argument about, oh, they shouldn't have made a second one. They should have just left it alone. There's always going to be that type of argument.
Best thing I watched was The Righteous Gemstones, which is a 2019 HBO comedy drama about a family of televangelists. And essentially it's about this family. So the father or the parents built this mega church, and they basically have these 3 adult children, and it's now becoming time for. So the mother died a few years earlier, and the father is nearing retirement, and he's kind of trying to get his adult children, whom he has been controlling or micromanaging their entire lives, into a point where they can take over the church. And the first season is largely about that flavor of religion, like, and the obscene amounts of money that are involved, and how it's more of a business than anything else and stuff like that. And this is like written by some comedians who come from that area. So this is very much informed by kind of their experiences growing up. And then the second 2 seasons kind of go more into like the family drama as the children take over, and they kind of try to kind of lead the church, and they have some teething problems, and there's all sorts of personal drama and everything. And it's just a pretty smart satire, where it's not at all subtle about what point it's making, but it's making it in a very entertaining and nuanced way, where you don't feel condescended to or preached to or something, ironically, about the message. It just shows these characters doing things, and the reasons and the ways that they do these things, and the reasons for doing them is the satire, right? And to the point where I've actually found Reddit posts from people who said, hey, I thought this was a satire, but it's not dunking on evangelicals nearly enough. Like, where are the jokes, or where's the satire? And it's like, that is the satire. Like everything about it is like a very scathing indictment of like mega churches and stuff like that. But it's also just a well-written drama with interesting characters and well-realized characters. And it kind of manages to be completely absurd in one way, but also like really human in another. And so like I watched like the 3 seasons like in a little under a week. There's a 4th season coming. So like if you're just looking for like well-written drama and comedy and satire about like a not everyday setting, then I think Righteous Gemstones is a good pick.
I did manage to sneak in The Cage. It was a series, actually. I managed to watch that with the family. That was really good. So that was an amateur fighter, UFC fighter. It's based in Paris, becomes a star overnight by knocking out a pro UFC fighter. And this pro UFC fighter is an a-hole. So yeah, so then so it's literally his journey trying to becoming that star and breaking into the UFC, and obviously leading up to the main fight with the guy that he knocked out. And yeah, there's just like a whole journey, a whole story, and just a whole madness that happens. But I really like French like films and TV shows, and this one was really good. I would actually recommend it. It's called The Cage on Netflix.
All right, my pick this week is Screamers, which is a 1995 sci-fi horror movie. And the idea is essentially that it's a remote mining planet. There are these two factions that have been at war over resources that have the potential to save Earth. And they are locked in this years-long, if not decades-long war. And everybody is essentially so far gone from Earth that they've basically been forgotten, and they've just been killing each other for years and years, and there's no end in sight. The title refers to this weapon called the Screamers, which are essentially saw blades stuck to drones that kind of bury under the ground. And as they come for you, they make this screaming sound. The plot is kind of whatever. It basically involves the first chance in years at peace negotiations. So a group of people from one faction start to seek out people from the other faction, and then the plot kind of unfolds from there, and they kind of travel through this desolate wasteland that the world has turned into. And the plot is not really the amazing thing. It's more about this sense of bleakness and hopelessness that comes from somebody who has lived through years of war. And it might accidentally have anticipated what drone warfare is like. Like, now that that's a reality, it actually kept reminding me as I watched it about stuff that has just happened in the past year or the past 2 years. So it's kind of interesting on that front. So it's all atmosphere, it's all character, it's all vibes, and the story is also there. But overall, I really enjoyed it. And it's this kind of old school science fiction that they don't really make very much of anymore. So I enjoyed it on that level. It was a massive flop when it came out and people called it trash. And I think it's at least a good time if you like that kind of movie.
Is there monsters in this film?
The Screamers are drones. They're kind of these autonomous drones that are basically replicating themselves, and they burrow through the ground and come after you. Part of the plot is that they've started making drones that look like people. That creates this paranoia angle of who can you trust, who is a screamer, who is a person. A theme of this is that kind of war is kind of nonsense, that the person on the other side is not really your enemy, you just happen to be on the other side. This arbitrariness of who's friend and who's foe. And then there's like an actual enemy that's dangerous to everybody, who looks like you but isn't you, but is actually a dangerous weapon that just trying to kill you. So it's kind of this whole perception of reality and that sort of thing that is based on a Philip K. Dick story, who was a famous science fiction author in the 60s and 70s, who wrote a whole bunch of stuff like this, like constructed reality and perception and that sort of thing. He also wrote like Minority Report and a few others, and Blade Runner as well. Like the stories that those movies are based on. And this is one of the less well-known ones, but it's just a good watch.
And the one thing that I actually was enjoying watching, and that was Conclave. For those that haven't seen it, or no, for those that have seen it, there is a review on the channel where these two gentlemen here did a review. I was kind of missing in action on that particular day. It's essentially just like a story about like these religious leaders, and they're trying to select a new pope. There's just like some like plotting and like secrets that are like sort of like being uncovered within it, essentially. Like I said, I kind of like fell asleep, which was really annoying because I was actually really enjoying the movie and I've not had a chance to kind of go back to it yet. From what I'd seen so far, it was really good. It was really interesting.
Were you awake for the ending?
Once I'd woken up, it was like I was watching it late. So by the time I woke up, I was like, let me just switch it off and I'll watch it again when I can. So I didn't get to the end of the movie now.
Because it's the ending that's controversial. Because in my view, like, it's a really tightly scripted political thriller up until the last 15 minutes, and then it just turns into moralizing when it could have been so much more. And we spent an hour talking on that when it came out. If you ignore the ending, it's probably one of the best political thrillers I've seen in years.
Yeah. So I did know your opinion on the ending. So I was keen to kind of get there and see what it's all about. But hopefully I might rewatch it. I might try to kind of like catch the rest of it this weekend, and then we can maybe have like a quick chat about it once I have seen all of it.
Yep. So the best thing I watched this week was The Package, which is a 2018 Netflix movie. And it's essentially about a group of teenagers who go to the woods to go camping. And as they kind of party and get drunk, things get a little out of hand, and one of them accidentally cuts off a vital part of his body. So they panic and they call for help. And then the friend gets airlifted out to the nearest hospital. And they put the severed body part in one of the ice boxes and hand that to the medics. And the plan is that they will wait until the morning, hike back to the car, and then rejoin their friend in the hospital. And then as they talk and process what has happened, they realize that they gave the medics the wrong icebox. And so now they have about 12 hours to get to the hospital and to get the package to their friend. And the whole thing is this wacky, raunchy comedy that essentially turns into a road trip at that point, where they go from one disaster to the next as they try to get to their friend before time runs out. And it's very funny. It's very, like, the characters are not the most interesting, but they all work. They all have their part in the story. And it's just one creative joke after the next. And it's pretty rare for a movie to actually get an emotional response out of me. And this one actually managed to gross me out and actually caused me to actually kind of back off from the screen a little bit because of what I was seeing. And it's this pretty obscure Netflix comedy that on paper sounds like it should be nothing special. Like there's like 20 that look exactly the same, but this one I thought was funnier and cleverer about its jokes than the others I've seen. And I was very pleasantly surprised. I put this on like late Sunday evening, didn't expect much from it. And before I knew it, I was actually enjoying myself. So that would be my recommendation.
So mine is a TV series, and it's actually a BBC series, actually. It's called The Traitors, and I don't know if anyone's kind of like come across it, heard of it, or whatever. It's kind of like a bit of a game show where you have like 22 people that go to this castle. 3 of them are deemed traitors, and then the others are deemed as faithfuls, essentially. Basically, it's a bit of like a psychological game, kind of like a reading game to try and figure out who the traitors are. And of course, the traitors are trying to like manipulate the other people to try and like have the faithfuls vote each other out each round. Not my typical recommendation game shows, but I don't know why it had me captivated. Just like something like the game playing, the sneakiness, and just like kind of like seeing people's like psyche and how they like kind of like analyze situations, behaviors. I don't know. I was like gripped. I was hooked onto the TV series and completely binged season 2 of it in like 1 and a bit days. It was just like great entertainment, to be honest. So that's my recommendation.
I've heard of it. I think I saw. Yeah, it was all right. It was all right. I haven't finished it though, but I might have to get back into it.
This week I watched Danger Close, The Battle of Long Ton, which is a 2019 Australian war movie, which essentially adapts the Battle of Long Ton, which is an event that occurred during the Vietnam War between Northern Vietnamese troops and Australian troops, where essentially an Australian patrol walked into a vastly superior number of Vietnamese troops. They kind of got bogged down and almost all died, but narrowly won in the end by working together. And the movie is essentially a very faithful adaptation of the Wikipedia page of that battle, because the whole point of the movie is to recreate essentially what happened. And so there's a lot of minutia, there's a lot of, and then this happened kind of thing. But what it seems to kind of add up to is basically just an accurate picture of what it was like to live through those events. And that was basically the focus of it. And when you look up reviews of this movie, they're scathing because the movie refuses to take a side in the politics of the Vietnam War on either side of it. It just purely says this is what happened and this is what it was like to live through those events. And it does not glamorize anything. It also does not condemn anything. And a lot of people have a problem with that. And so on that level, it kind of was interesting. The most praise it gets from like military nerds and people who really know the ins and outs of how these things work, where apparently they went to great lengths to make this authentic. So all the depictions of how things work and how people behave and stuff like that seems to be like I've seen some criticism of this movie, but you have to get really nitpicky. And if you can say that about a movie, then that's probably pretty good. And that by itself does not make it a good movie. It also tells the story well. But it basically starts off with, let's tell the story of what happened. And it really succeeds at that, I thought. And it is also a well-told story and like a good watch. But it's kind of refreshing where you can kind of just say, okay, like now I have an idea of what that was like. The Vietnam War is almost always told from the American point of view or the Vietnamese point of view. But there were other nations involved as well, and they had different experiences, especially since these were all conscripts. So these weren't like professional soldiers. These were all like just regular 18-year-olds that kind of were told to go there. And so that's part of what makes this war interesting from a story perspective, that this was the last like conscription war that a Western nation fought. And it's also very scrutinized, right? So the Vietnam War movies are kind of interesting on that level, but they're also kind of like a little bit predictable and samey. And this one just looks at it from a different angle, and I thought that was interesting.